Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Skip Mason,
pastor, preacher, historian, author,
teacher, librarian, archivist, world traveler,
collector, family historian, avid reader, and creator of the popular Vanishing Black Atlanta Facebook page.
But a lot of folks who love history.
Most importantly,
he's our
dad who loves his family and who taught us the importance of our history and having important conversations.
Join him now for this episode of Conversations with Dr. Skip.
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Good afternoon, my brothers and sisters across our Zion. I'm Skip Mason, and I am so delighted to welcome you to another afternoon of CME 150 conversation. This afternoon's show is entitled Sick and Tired of Being Sick and Tired, Sister Freedom Fighters and the CME Church. And today we will have an opportunity to briefly celebrate, to call out, and to remember 4 freedom fighters. Autherine Lucy, of course, who graduated from Miles College and integrated the University of Alabama. Fannie Lou Hamer, a great spokeswoman, spokesperson, and advocate for civil rights. Mamie Till Mobley, the mother of Emmett Till, a fearless freedom worker to bring justice to the cause of equality. And Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, who was one of the co-founders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And all of them had some tie or connection to the CME Church, and I'll be glad to tell you about that in just a moment. Let me greet and always welcome you and to our College of Bishops, our Senior Bishop, Lawrence Reddick, and Sister Wendy Jones Reddick, the Chair of the College of Bishops, Bishop Kenneth Carter and Sister Roselle Carter, to the Chair of the CIT Committee, Bishop James B. Walker, who celebrated a birthday this week, and Mrs. Dolores Walker, and to my Bishop, Dr. Thomas Lewis Brown, and our First Lady, Dr. Louise Baker Brown, who served this morning as the keynote speaker for the West Mitchell Street Women's Day celebration. And she preached a powerful sermon out of Ruth, the first chapter, 16 and 17, Where Will Your Faith Lead You? You certainly need to listen to that. It truly blessed us. But I am delighted today to spend a few moments with you. And I have a very, very special guest who is a distinguished author and scholar. And I'm going to bring her up momentarily, Kate Clifford Lawson, who has a new book on Fannie Lou Hamer coming out. And she has already written books on Harriet Tubman and Rosemary Kennedy. And so I'm delighted that she would be here with us today. But more importantly, I'm delighted that you continue to stop by on Sunday. And I promise you, we won't be on very, very long today, but long enough so that we can speak their names today and remember the amazing and remarkable accomplishments of some great women. Today, I want to begin with Autherine Lucy. Many of you may be familiar with Autherine Lucy, as you know that she integrated the University of Alabama, and that she was also a graduate of Miles College, which more importantly connects her to our beloved church. She graduated from Miles with a BA in English in 1952 after having attended Selma University. She was born in Shiloh, Alabama, the daughter of sharecroppers and the youngest of 9 children, and spent her early years attending the public school and then attending various academies before she ended up at Miles College. And it was Miles that prepared her. It was Miles that made her ready for the task that would be hers to integrate the University of Alabama. I want you to take a look at this footage, please.
And the white resistance could also be violent. In February 1956, a black woman named Autherine Lucy was quietly admitted to the all-white University of Alabama. But the night after she arrived, students and townspeople began a riot. The university suspended Lucy temporarily, it said, for her own protection. And Autherine Lucy sued, claiming that mob rule was being allowed to overturn the law.
What brought about these actions, I feel, is that lawless elements outside the campus set themselves over and above the law. Their actions brought great discredit to our nation.
The charge has been made, and made by some fairly moderate people, gradualists you might call them, that the NAACP, with General Counsel UR, is moving too far, too fast. That following the decision of the Supreme Court, you would have been well advised to let things move along gradually for a while, that you can't overthrow the prejudices of 300 years overnight.
You can't, or maybe you can't, override prejudice overnight. But the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1863, 90-odd years ago. I believe in gradualism. I also believe that 90-odd years is pretty gradual.
Autherine Lucy won her case, but the Board of Trustees expelled her anyway for saying the university had used the riots to keep her out. Across the South, the Lucy case gave resisting whites hope. If they were willing to use violence to fight the law, it seemed they could keep black children in black schools.
And so today we speak the name of Autherine Lucy, known and described as the architect of desegregating Alabama's educational system. She had distinguished attorneys, including the great Thurgood Marshall, who was a part of her legal team, and also Arthur Shores, and together they helped to build a lawsuit against the university that they believed that the school helped the white mob by not having protected her. And so we are so glad that she was a part of Miles, that she was educated. And last year, Miles College bestowed upon her an honorary degree. Take a look.
She made history when she enrolled and attended the University of Alabama, and today Autherine Lucy Foster, a living legacy, was presented with an honorary degree from Miles College during a private ceremony on campus.
The candidate for the Doctor of Humane Letters, Autherine Lucy Foster.
A much smaller crowd, but still a very warm welcome at Miles College for trailblazer Autherine Lucy Foster.
It means a whole lot that they would take up time and bring this sister who is not even walking. I have to get people to take me out of the bed. Today I walk better than ever.
The retired educator receiving her second honorary doctorate, one from the college she graduated from in 1952. The University of Alabama awarded her one in 2019.
I did not realize that we had not bestowed that honor upon her. And when I found it out, we presented it to the board in March, and we would have given it to her had we had commencement in May, but of course, COVID got in the way.
Miles College President Bobby Knight says she wanted to recognize the significant contribution Foster made in our state and country's history. Foster was the first African-American student to desegregate the University of Alabama, paving a path of strength for future generations after threats were made against her life and riots broke out because of her presence on campus.
They appreciate it, so it makes me appreciate it, and I hope that everybody will see it for what it's worth. And don't let us go back.
She's a living legacy. The fact that women in this country are still facing these barriers in a lot of areas, it makes, first of all, makes me happy and proud of what she did, but it also just makes me realize how far we still have to go in this country.
And Bobby Knight said it was so special being the first female president of Miles College to bestow that honor upon another woman.
And so today we salute, we honor, and we celebrate the great Autherine Lucy Foster, shown here with Eleanor Roosevelt and Rosa Parks. Miles made one of our great CME institutions. And so wherever you are right now, you call out the name of Autherine Lucy Foster. We today, during Women's History Month and forever, we honor you and we speak your name today. The second person that I'd like to honor and share is one whose son's story pretty much set the modern day civil rights movement ablaze. Today, we speak the name of Mamie Till Mobley.
Emmett was born the 25th of July, 1941. And it was a very difficult birth. He was a breech baby, and they had to get him turned around and so forth and so on, which caused a whole lot of misery and pain. He was the happiest baby in the world. It looked like he said, "Free at last, I'm here, I'm free." And nothing fazed him. By that I mean you didn't have to hold him and rock him and pet him. If you gave him that bottle or made sure he was dry, you could put him in his bed and he would lie there and kick and coo and for hours. As he grew up, it was more like we were sisters and brothers almost, because my mother raised him while I went to work. So it was like he was hers, and I knew I was hers, and we had fun together. We laughed together. We never did much fighting until he and I moved alone, and it would become necessary to discipline him ever so often.
I don't know if prankster would be the right term or not, but I'll just give you an example of his fun, loving ways. Once we were in Chicago with him, and we were walking down 63rd Street in St. Lawrence, and he yelled out, "Here are my two big cousins from the suburbs. Nobody can beat them up." So we grabbed them up and shut him up right quick. So that was fun to him, but it wasn't so funny to us at the time.
And so today, most of you know the story of Emmett Till. You know that he traveled to Money, Mississippi to spend the summer. And we know of the horrific death that he endured. We also know of the strength and courage of his mother after his body was relocated to Chicago, and how she ensured that the entire world would see what they had done to her son. Ebony and Jet magazine played an instrumental role in that. We know the injustices of the legal system, and that the two that were accused were not convicted. And we know that in 1955 and 56, she traveled throughout the country speaking to large congregations to talk about the acquittal and the next steps. We know that on October 2nd, 1955, she was in Harlem, New York, at the Great Williams Institutional Church. And the newspaper account says that there were over 50,000 people in the streets trying to gather inside of the church to hear Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley. She was accompanied by her father as well. And so inside of our great Williams Memorial Institutional Church, Mamie Till Mobley stood gallant and courageous. And during that particular mass meeting, the great Daisy Bates out of Little Rock, Arkansas, phoned in. She was not able to be there to offer her support. And we all know Daisy Bates because she's associated with the Little Rock Nine. One of the most intriguing and phenomenal aspects of Mrs. Mamie Till's story is that she never harbored any ill will against those who committed that heinous crime against her son.
I too give honor to God, who is the source of my strength and the reason for my being. In 1955, when my only child was killed, it seemed that there was nothing for me to live for. I wanted to die. But in the midst of that planning, the Lord spoke to me, and he told me not to spend my time hating the perpetrators of the crime, because they would not even know that I was hating them. And the things that would be released into my body would eventually destroy me. And while I was pondering that statement, another thing came, something was spoken to me, and that something was, I am the ruler of heaven and earth. I see all things. I'm commissioning you to go into the vineyard and work. And what is right, I will pay. And don't forget that vengeance is mine. And a wonderful thing happened to me. It seemed like someone took a giant eraser and my mind had become a chalkboard, and everything, all memories of Mr. Milam and Mr. Bryant were erased from my thoughts. I was able to go out into the vineyard and work, which I'd been commissioned to do, and that work turned out to be training boys and girls to do Dr. King's speeches. I can truthfully say that for 47 years, I have not wasted any time hating Milam and Bryant. They became inconsequential so far as I was concerned. It was as if they didn't even exist.
And so today, Mamie Till Mobley, who stood in the Williams Memorial Institutional Church, we speak your name, and we remember you, and we remember your son, and we know that your sacrifices and your living has not been in vain. Next, we want to remember and recall one who is near and dear to me in a number of ways. Her name is Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. Ruby Doris Smith Robinson is a native of Atlanta. She grew up in the West Mitchell Street CME Church, where she was an active member of the youth choir and the CYF, and was an active participant of the leadership training school, and nurtured by the mothers, the church mothers at West Mitchell Street and the West Mitchell Street family, which I am so blessed to currently serve, as a pastor. And we cannot say enough about the influence of the church on our young people. and in a number of stories and articles and books, including the landmark book that was published on Ruby Doris's life, Soon We Will Not Cry, The Liberation of Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. And I certainly recommend that you get this book and read it because it talks about her growing up in the CME Church. But Ruby Doris was a fearless warrior. She and her family members, her sister, Dr. Mary Ann Smith, who was a student at Morris Brown, while Ruby Doris was a student at Spelman, were very active in the student movement during the 1960s.
My name is Mary Ann Smith Wilson, and I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. In 1960, I was a student at Morris Brown College, and that was the time that the student movement for civil rights began. As one of the so-called leaders of the movement, most of the time I was directing, reporting, communicating, giving orders. But there was just one time that I was arrested, and that was in Atlanta after our Freedom Ride. When we came back, we left from the terminal station going to Birmingham, Alabama. There were 4 of us. Ruby Doris, my sister, was with me. We were 2 or 4 people who went there. We came back. We had traveled and we were on our way back. So we went into the cafeteria, which was basically a white cafeteria. And all I know is that the police were called, we were arrested, but we were bailed out later that evening. At one particular meeting, when the students at Rock Hill had decided they were going to do jail without bail, then I said, we should go and support them. And when I started thinking about the fact that, I've applied for graduate school and so much, and I started talking it down, and Ruby Doris was there, and she started saying, I'll take your place, I want to go. And so I wiggled out, and she wiggled in. She went to Rock Hill, jail without bail, and served 30 days in jail. And here she is returning to Atlanta after 30 days in jail at Rock Hill. And there I was to greet her. That was the beginning, from Rock Hill when she went jail without bail to the Freedom Rides. That began her involvement, which is legendary now. This is Ruby Doris, my sister, and she is waiting to get on the bus for the National Freedom Rides, and she ended up spending 30 days in jail at the prison in Mississippi. Her mantra was, if you think free, you are free. So she figured as long as she had her freedom of mind to think, she could do anything.
How does one pay tribute to greatness? How does one remember courage? How does one honor sacrifice? I asked myself each of these questions when Councilman Bond asked me to bring remarks on behalf of my aunt, Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. Although I do not feel worthy to speak on her behalf, I am honored to stand here today as a product of all that she lived, fought, and died for. My memories of Ruby Doris Smith Robinson are shaped through the lenses of others. She was only 25 when she died, some 3 years before I was born. Despite her physical absence, her life and her legacy have always loomed larger than life for me. It's no wonder, though, because I have been told that she lived life larger than life. You know the Ruby Doris stories better than I do. Remember the time she went to Jim Crow Rock Hill, South Carolina to demonstrate, knowing that she would be jailed for over 30 days? Or the time she protested in segregated Mississippi and shared a single jail cell with other 23 student freedom fighters for weeks? Or perhaps you remember when she and the other students were arrested in Atlanta, and when asked her first name, she responded freedom, and when asked her last name, she said now. Or maybe you were there when she boldly confronted Governor George Wallace on the tarmac of the Atlanta airport. Or you may even recall the one-woman sit-in that she staged in New York when she and Julian Bond and John Lewis and Fannie Lou Hamer were on their way to visit King Turay in Africa, and she and other members of SNCC were told that they were being bumped from their flight. Yes, you know the stories better than I because you, the students of the movement, were there. It has been said that Ruby Doris's attention to detail made the dramatic moments possible. Behind every march, there was a planner. Behind every demonstration, there was a leader. Behind every bond posted, there was a fundraiser. Ruby Doris Smith Robinson was all of those things and more. To some, she was a loved one. She was a daughter. She was a wife. She was a mother. She was an aunt. She was a sister. She was a friend. To others, she was a co-ed, a co-worker, an organizer, an activist, an agitator, and a leader. To all, she was dedicated, she was bold, she was brilliant, she was fearless, she was a warrior.
And she was a CME, a member of West Mitchell Street CME Church. And so today, across our Zion, I want you to speak her name today. Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, one of the co-founders of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and a fearless warrior for the rights of all people. We today, Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, we speak your name. And last, but certainly not least, is one who is so remarkable that it is hard to believe that she was able to accomplish all that she did given her very humble beginnings. I speak today of Fannie Lou Hamer.
I'm Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I farmed on the Marlowe plantation for 18 years. I had charge of keeping up with the time and paying off, and I went down the 31st of August to try to register. And after I had gotten back home, Mr. Marlowe told me that I would have to go down and withdraw my registration or leave, because they wasn't ready for that in Mississippi. And I said, Mr. Marlowe, I'm trying to register for myself. So I had to leave that same night after I had gone down in August. And then I spent one night with Mrs. Tucker, and after about 2 days in September, they shot in the house 15 times, thinking that I was there.
And so in December of 1964, representatives of the Mississippi Freedmen Democratic Party toured northern cities seeking support for their campaign to block the seating of Mississippi's pro-segregation congressman who had been elected through the disenfranchisement of Black voters. That particular rally was held at, again, the great Williams Institutional CME Church in the heart of Harlem. And it was there at that rally where both Malcolm X and Fannie Lou Hamer served as the chief speakers. And it was where she also gave a speech entitled, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." Today, I am so delighted to have with me to help to paint that picture and tell us a little bit about the great Fannie Lou Hamer, her biographer, Kate Clifford Lawson, is an American historian and a Harriet Tubman scholar. who has written the great book Bound for the Promised Land. She earned her doctorate in history at the University of New Hampshire and is a graduate of Simmons College. Kate, thank you so much for sharing with us today, the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, as we celebrate our 150th anniversary this year. And as we remember those significant moments and events in the life of the church, and I can't think of an event that is more poignant and more significant than the fact that in one of our great institutions, our churches, you have not only Malcolm X standing and speaking, but you also have Fannie Lou Hamer. Let me say also that Williams Institution was known as a haven for social outreach and justice. And most of his pastors, including Bishop Joseph Carlisle Cole, who was the pastor at the time, all had that outreach. And it continues today with the dynamic leadership of one of our church historians, Dr. Jermaine Marshall. But tell us a little bit about that moment and tell us about the book that you have penned on Fannie Lou Hamer.
Well, thank you for having me. And your lead in was just fantastic. And I love the way that you just say that you almost stumbled on the words to describe Fannie Lou Hamer. She was a remarkable human being, and she was of the moment, and she pushed the civil rights movement forward in so many ways. And that moment in New York City on stage with Malcolm X was really quite remarkable. They were two very different people, and yet they both had this belief that they had to keep fighting for civil rights, equality, justice, self-determination. They just pursued it in different ways. She was very much dedicated to nonviolence, and he advocated, of course, a more violent approach in response to white violence. But they both deeply, deeply understood that what Mississippi was struggling with, Harlem was struggling with as well. Food insecurity, access to housing, still equal rights in Harlem. In Mississippi, it may have been voting rights that they were struggling with, and in Harlem, people could vote. But she understood that people suffered everywhere and the world needed to change. And the votes in Harlem could make a difference for the people living in Mississippi who did not have the vote. And she admired Malcolm X very much, even though she did not agree with his stance on certain things. And he certainly admired her. He certainly admired her greatly for her struggles and the things that she had done.
So, Kate, can we say that Fannie Lou Hamer spent a lot of time traveling and speaking in churches across the South and especially in the North? And so what was her purpose? Was she attempting to bring attention? Was she raising funds? And tell us a little bit about her run for, I think she ran for Congress.
Right, she did. Well, first of all, she did speak in churches. She grew up in the church. She was a profoundly spiritual and faithful woman. She had the inner core of a preacher. She would get on the stage and she could speak to an audience and pull passages out of the Bible and interpret them for the audience and get them excited and motivated. And she truly believed in the beginning of your show, you talked about love, that Emmett Till's mother could not hate the men who killed her son. And Fannie Lou Hamer was the same way. She did not want to have hate in her heart. Mm-hmm. She felt that through God and through doing the work that she was doing, that she could change the world, because hate would slow her down. Hate would cripple her like it was crippling white people who could not give up their segregationist views, their racist views. And so she did run for Congress in Mississippi. She did not win because, of course, Black people could not vote in Mississippi. They were denied the vote repeatedly. But she didn't give up. She just kept going. She was ill. She had ill health. And she had little money, but she had a vision, and she knew that God was with her, and she kept pursuing that goal until the day she died.
Your book is due out in October.
Yes.
Walk with Me, a biography of Fannie Lou Hamer. What have you discovered about her that we may not know, the general public may not be aware of? Did you find anything that was just eye-opening or riveting as it relates to her life? I know she was a public figure.
She was a public.
Yeah.
So there were many details that I uncovered about her life that just add to what we already know about her. She was the 20th child of sharecroppers, poor sharecroppers in Mississippi. She was a very special child. She was gifted. She had a 6th grade education, but she was a voracious reader. She was always seeking ways to educate herself and find ways to improve the world around her. And she had gifts. She had that amazing voice to sing and draw people in, and that brilliant mind that she could put together an argument and a discussion that drew people in and made them think and reevaluate their situation. And so she didn't come out of nowhere in 1962 when she tried to register to vote and became involved in the civil rights movement. She had been active for 20 years before that. And that's what we need to know about her. And she had mentors and she mentored young people. She knew that the future was young people and that they needed to be nurtured and mentored. And so she had so many gifts, and we need to celebrate those gifts and recognize that there are Fannie Lou Hamers in our communities today, and they need to be celebrated and supported and lifted up.
Yes, indeed. So the phrase, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Now, that was the title of her speech that she gave at Williams CME Church. Do you know where that came from? Do you know when she began to introduce that as a part of the lexicon of her travels, her speech, and her fight? Were you able to find anything out about that?
Right. So she started using a phrase like that about a year before. She sort of tested it out. But personally, in her private life, she was saying it all the time to her friends in church. Like, you know, we work 12, 14 hours a day and we make $3. You know, we're sick and tired of being sick because they had ill health and tired and not making their way in the world and being put down all the time. And she realized she was such a great orator. She realized that using that phrase really moved an audience. And so she kept using it over and over, and people understood it. They felt it.
Yes, indeed. And we, of course, we feel it even today. Well, we are excited about your book. I think that while we know her name, she is still one of the unsung heroines of the movement. I do understand, I think in my research, that there is a pending movie on her life in which Viola Davis is scheduled to play her. And if so, that should be phenomenal. We know that she left a tremendous legacy, and we celebrate her today. We're grateful that she stood in one of our CME churches in the pulpit, along with Malcolm X, to share, and our beloved Bishop Cole, then Reverend Cole, to speak to the hearts and souls of people. This is her final resting place, and of course the epitaph reads, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so, Kate, we thank you for taking a few minutes out of your Sunday to join us. And we look forward to having you back maybe later in the fall and next year when the book is out, when we've had a chance to read it and to share. Again, the title of the book is Walk with Me, a biography of Fannie Lou Hamer by Kate Clifford Lawson. Kate, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And so, my brothers and sisters in our Zion, we speak the name of Fannie Lou Hamer, who stood at Williams CME to proclaim, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Well, brothers and sisters, we thank you for tuning in. This concludes our show today. Let me also thank Dr. Risa Duhart, my dear friend and supporter, who always makes sure that the word is out about what the show is going to be about. And I appreciate the tremendous effort that she does. Next Sunday, we're looking at some phenomenal pioneering women in our church, including the wives of the first 6 bishops of the church. We're also looking at a pioneer woman who was one of the wealthiest women in the country, America, Amanda Dixon, out of Sparta, Georgia. And we're looking at the lives of Dr. Maddie Coleman and Helena B. Cobb. So I invite you to tune in on next Sunday for another episode of CME 150 Facebook Live Conversation. I want to close out this show again with honoring these phenomenal women, Autherine Lucy, Fannie Lou Hamer, Mamie Till Mobley, and Ruby Doris Smith. We speak their names. Now, take a look at this closing video on Fannie Lou Hamer and the voting rights movement. Have a good Sunday afternoon. Be safe, stay covered, your mask. God bless you till we meet again.
On paper.
The amendment passes and it's ratified. It doesn't mean that Black women, yay, we can vote. No, now you're under the same restrictions that Black men were under after the Reconstruction period.
It's an incomplete victory.
Native Americans have to wait 4 more years to even be considered citizens. Chinese immigrants won't achieve full rights until the 1940s.
People want to prohibit people from having free and uncovered access because that means that power and resources will then be redistributed. And then who will that favor? And so there's this fear that's behind all of this.
In the segregated South, an organized effort keeps Black citizens from the ballot box.
Residency requirements, poll taxes, literacy requirements.
The very real threat of violence, of lynching, were visited upon communities who did try to exercise the right to vote, which was why there are vast communities where people didn't even attempt to try to vote.
One woman brings the struggle to the national stage. Fannie Lou Hamer was born the last of 20 children to a family of Mississippi sharecroppers.
Growing up in the Mississippi Delta, she thinks, well, voting could help change my economic circumstances, and so I am going to try and go and register to vote.
She isn't allowed to register. Just for attempting it, she is fired from her job of 18 years and put out of her home. But she persists, becoming a voter and an activist.
The bus that she's in gets stopped, and all of the people who are with her who are trying to register to vote, they are removed from the bus.
Once again, women asking for their democratic rights are thrown in jail.
3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was State Highway Patrol. And he said, we're going to make you wish you was dead.
She is physically assaulted to the point that that assault has lifelong effects on her.